So it's a privilege to be here. It's a privilege to share the stage with Alex. I just want to begin by saying this is actually a historic occasion, although most of you don't know this, and you certainly don't know this. Alex obviously is like one of the most badass climbers in the world, and I'm a hypochondriac. So on stage, for the one and only time, the world's most fearless man and the world's most fearful man. So it's a good pairing, I hope. So I just want to very quickly get a sense of the audience, just so that we know who we're talking to. Raise your hands if you've seen Free Solo or read Alone on the Wall. Okay, so you're in a room full of fans. Raise your hands if you are rock climbers. Okay, raise your hands if you have free soloed. 1, 2. Okay, awesome. Now,
but raise your hand if you ski, because that's way more dangerous. I'm just saying.
So, this is what I was going to ask. Raise your hands if you consider yourself in some aspect of your life, no matter what you do, you consider yourself a risk taker. Okay.
It's because they all ski.
Oh, yeah. They just don't know they're risk takers, right? All right. So what I wanted to do was really sort of think about, questions of risk, questions about your process and preparation. And when I was reading Alone on the Wall, you were describing your climb of Moonlight Buttress, your first, I guess it was 2008, your first free solo, which you did by yourself, kind of not telling anyone, right?
Yeah, the most solos have been by myself, except for the notable exception of making a movie about free soloing. But for the most part, free soloing is totally by yourself.
But you just didn't tell a soul you were going to do it.
No, my whole experience on Moonlight Buttress, Moonlight was one of the first big free solos that I did, and it was sort of at the beginning of becoming a professional climber and getting sponsored by companies and things like that. But the whole process took me less than a week. I mean, I basically showed up in Zion National Park, spent a couple days working the route, then it rained a little bit, so I had to rest, and then I did the climb. And so it's it's a pretty contained experience.
So one of the things you wrote...
And to be fair, I mean, it's pre-smartphone. I didn't have that many friends. There's nobody really to tell about it. You know what I mean? Like, there's no... I was living in a car by myself, and you don't have great cell service, and you don't have any friends. It's just...
But, do you have, dog tags in case you fall, and just people can...
No, I figure people will find my flip phone and figure it out. No, it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I didn't really think about it.
So one of the things you write about the climb is, I was very struck by this. You write, I was 100% certain I would not fall off, and that certainty is what kept me from falling off. Can you just talk about that sense of certainty that you need to climb like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sentence kind of gets to the heart of free soloing in some ways, which is that at the base of it, there has to be a self-confidence. There has to be a real confidence that you can do the thing that you're setting out to do. And I think that the only way that it really works out is if you can maintain that confidence throughout. I mean, basically, if you get scared while free soloing, it all starts to crumble a little bit. You start to not trust your feet. You don't weight them as well. They're much more likely to slip. I mean, basically, everything can kind of spiral negatively. Whereas if you can, if you're 100% confident you can do the thing, and then you go up and you climb at your best, then you do actually do it, I guess.
So, I mean, but apropos...
Though that still needs to be based upon you do actually have to be able to do the climb, and that's why I had, and that's why I had practiced ahead of time. The thing is, basically, I had done it on a rope many times. Over the preceding couple days, I'd gone up and down it by myself on a rope several times. I knew that I could do it, and so with the same kind of confidence that that you can walk across that table without falling off. You're like, I know that I can walk down a sidewalk without falling, and then you just go and execute it. So that's the kind of.
Does it mean you were confident, or had you memorized the route? How much preparation did that's 800 feet, right? How much did that take?
Well, so that particular route is a very straightforward style. It's basically a 1-inch crack that just runs forever. So it's the kind of thing that if you have the fitness for it, if you don't get too fatigued, your muscles don't get too tired, then it feels pretty safe the whole way. And so I didn't exactly memorize all the moves because you don't really have to, because you just put your fingers in the crack and just crank on them. But I knew that I could do it.
So a few months later, you do your first free solo of Half Dome, which is like more than twice the height. It's 2,000 feet or so?
Yeah, correct.
And you're 150 feet from the summit, and you kind of freaked out. So what happened there that hadn't happened on Moonlight?
Well, so that's, yeah, a sad story. Everybody settle in for a sad, long story. So, I mean, in a lot of ways, it was the opposite experience for Moonlight. And the thing about Moonlight is that there's, have many of you guys been to Zion National Park? I mean, have you guys all hiked up Angel's Landing or hiked up Moonlight? It's one of the most beautiful hikes in the country. But there's a paved trail that goes all the way to the summit of Moonlight Buttress. So it's, it takes maybe 40 minutes to stroll to the summit with a bunch of ropes, rappel down, and work on the climb. So it's really straightforward to work by yourself. Half Dome is the opposite end of the spectrum because it's a 2,000-foot face, but it's also 2,500 feet above the valley floor. So you're doing almost 5,000 feet of vertical to get to the top. And then because it's a 2,000-foot wall, it's not really that, I don't own that much rope, especially back then. I didn't really know how you prepare something of that scale because it's just so big. And then, some of my friends would be willing to climb the route with me, but not really more than once. And I don't have that many friends, and you don't want to burn through partners climbing the route over and over.
Do you have friends now?
I have more friends now. It's been.
Do you like friends?
No,
Anyone want to be Alex's friend?
No, I'm good. I'm good with partners now, but the intervening 10 years have been good to me. But at the time, I was, it was all a little more grim. But so the point with Half Dome was that it really, because I didn't quite know how to do the prep work for it, I didn't really know how to practice. So I sort of intentionally, and actually, so the physical rating on Half Dome, technically it's easier than Moonlight, the climb we were talking about before. So the combination of not really knowing how to prepare for it, but then also thinking that, well, technically, physically it is easier, so this should be fine. I decided to take a different approach, which was to keep it a little more adventurous and just sort of rise to the occasion, go up there and do my best and see how it goes. And that's obviously didn't go that well. But I thought that it would be an okay strategy.
It didn't go that well because you got a little lost on the route?
Well, yeah, I got a little lost on the route. So I'd done the bare minimum prep work, which is climbing the whole face with a friend of mine 2 days before with a rope. So I knew roughly where to go, and I knew that I could do it. And then I took a rest day. I sat in my car all day thinking about it, trying to, get psyched. And then the next day I hiked up there by myself, did the climb, but didn't totally know where to go. At the last second, kind of made an impromptu decision to bypass one of the sections that I'd climbed with the rope before. So that involved climbing this whole section of the wall that I'd actually never been on. So, you're 1,000 feet off the ground, kind of wondering if you're off route, being like, oh, this seems unfamiliar. Like, I hope I can find my way back, And so, the climb wound up taking me almost 3 hours. I think it was 250. And so at the time, especially, that's still a long time, but especially then, that was a really long time for me to be fully focused and, out there like that. It was much.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Yeah, of
Just
course.
a general question. How important is speed for free soloing? It seems to me that speed aids because concentration wanes. Is that right?
Yeah, that's sort of true, but I actually never intentionally try to go quickly. I always keep track of my time because I care about that kind of thing. I like setting speed records. I think it's fun and it's cool. But I'm never trying to climb fast. Mostly when I've done big free solos, they've wound up being speed records, sort of as a byproduct of the fact that I don't have a partner. I don't have to wait for, typically when you climb, one person goes, waits for the other, and you kind of take turns the whole way. So it's relatively slow. The timing when you're free soloing just winds up being a lot faster just because you're not waiting for your partner. You don't have the weight of the rope hanging off you. You don't have all the gear on you. It just winds up being a little bit quicker, but I'm never trying to go fast. And I think that overall it's safer to take your time and let your concentration, I don't know. It's a balance because, yeah, obviously your concentration starts to fade over time, but you definitely don't want to be hurrying up there either because then you make a careless mistake and fall to your death.
So when you had those 5 minutes of panic, how do you work your way out of that?
Yeah, what Brett's mentioning is the whole Half Dome experience.
I don't mean to bring up your most disgraceful moment as a climber.
No, that's far from my worst. We can get to my worst moments later. But no, so towards the top of Half Dome is the actual physical crux of the route, and by then, I was 2.5 hours into this whole experience. My mind was starting to fray. It was all kind of going south, and then I got to a part that was actually quite scary, and I didn't know what to do, and so then I spent. It probably isn't 5 minutes though. It's probably 30 seconds, but it feels like a lifetime of standing there thinking, oh my God, I'm about to die. I don't know what to do. My foot's going to slip. I don't know, oh no, it's all coming apart. But the reality is that, you're standing on these tiny, tiny little edges and your calves are slowly getting pumped. And so, what feels like a long time is probably 30 seconds, and then you make a decision and keep moving, since I kind of had to, since you can't just stand there indefinitely.
So your climb of Half Dome, I think, was what started to make you well known outside of the climbing community. There was that famous picture of you on, what's it called, Thank God Ledge.
Thank God Ledge, yeah.
On Thank God Ledge, on the cover of National Geographic. Endorsements started rolling in, money started rolling. People wanted to make films about you.
Money didn't quite start then.
Okay.
But eventually I started to make a living, yeah.
Well, at least sponsorships, right?
Yeah, no, that's true. But actually, most of my main sponsors had sort of happened right before then.
Yeah.
And then that kind of solidified the fact that I could now eat.
Well, let's get to let's get to the part where people start filming you. One of the things you write, which cracked me up in the book, is I think you're in Borneo or Indonesia somewhere, and someone's filming you, and you say the experience is like being told, dance monkey, like all of a sudden, like you've got to perform. So now you're not just climbing for the sake of the climb, for the sake of speed or whatever it is. You're climbing for a whole team that has a set of expectations. Just how does that, what do you have to do to prepare mentally and physically for the fact that you're now not just a climber or an athlete, you're a performer?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, so that kind of crept up over the years. I mean, there definitely wasn't a point where I went from feeling like a climber to suddenly feeling like a performer. It's more like, one day every couple months, you have a day where you have to go out and perform. And then, and that never really bothered me because, we all have to work somehow to support ourselves. And I'm like, I don't mind working on the rock sometimes. I mean, I'd much rather work while climbing than I don't really have an education or any other skills. I'm like, I'd much rather be climbing than like laying brick or like roofing or something. I don't, and so, I mean, from that perspective, I'm like, this is not a bad gig. I like climbing. So, but I mean, you're right though that it does sort of change the experience a little bit. I mean, particularly with the free soloing, I mean, it's a little bit of a weird area because, if you're risking your life for a camera, it's like a bit of a weird thing. Though typically, I mean, if we really feel like diving into it, if we're having a chat, let's have a chat. Oh, this is all recorded though, huh? Oh yeah. That guy just give a thumbs up in the back. Yeah, this is recorded. Yeah, but so I mean, most filming is posed after the fact anyway, and so the filming on Half Dome, the photos, Thank God Ledge, things like that, those were all taken later. When you just come back to the same climb, you rappel into position, you reclimb certain sections.
Is that true of free solo?
No, that's not true of free solo. Yeah. That's why I won an Academy Award. Yeah. But no, honestly, that was a huge distinction for me personally, was because I had done a lot of filming and a lot of photography up to then. I mean, so I've also done a lot of work for brands. I'm sponsored by many different companies, and it's totally common in the outdoor world to go out and do a photo shoot. You choose some interesting looking piece of rock, you climb it over and over, you take nice pictures, you get the beautiful body positions. The photographer tells you the best way to look on the rock, and you just do it. You just go out and like shoot for the day. Free solo was sort of my first experience where they were actually just filming what I did for 2 years. And in some ways, it was actually slightly annoying to me because I would have preferred having more guidance, more direction. Because not that I'm calling Jimmy Chin a bad director, but or his wife Chai. But the thing about it is that,
are there any scenes in the movie that you're embarrassed by?
Oh, yeah, there are plenty of unflattering scenes in the film. Yeah, I mean, you've seen it, right?
3 times.
Yeah. No. I mean,
wait, hang on. Does anyone think there's a single unflattering scene in the entire movie? No.
Are you guys? No. Have you seen the film? No. There are whole sections that I find horrifying. I'm like, oh no.
Well, like, for example.
Well, my whole relationship. You're just like, oh, that's kind of. Though I mean, it's hard. We're like wandering into interesting terrain. I mean, the tough thing with that was because we started dating basically right when they started filming with me. So a lot of the lines in the film where I'm talking about my girlfriend, and we're still together, things are great. Sonny's great. Thanks. I'll tell her you applauded. She'll like it.
They're recording, so.
Oh yeah,
watching.
Perfect. I hope she's not watching. No, but so many of the things that I say about her in the beginning of the film were things that I said about a woman that I just started dating. We're a couple weeks into a relationship, or like 2 months into a relationship. She hadn't really started climbing at that point. She was climbing, very casually. So I have a lot of lines in the film where I'm like, oh, she's not really a climber. Like, we'll see how this plays out. I'm not really that invested. But it's like, oh, it's like casually dating somebody new. Now fast forward 3.5 years later, you're like, it's slightly embarrassing to see that stuff. That's all I'm saying.
Did you
like
feel...
I could have phrased things a little nicer, a little more nicely.
But you must have felt you always had an option to just leave your personal life out of the film. Why did you choose to keep it in?
I don't know. I mean, I never really felt that was an option. I mean, basically from the beginning, I sort of just committed 100% to the project, and I trusted the filmmakers. I trusted Chai Bassarelli and Jimmy Chin, the co-directors. I've worked with and climbed with Jimmy for years. I know them, I trust them, and I believed in their process. And I sort of, if this is what you guys need, I'll just, And in some ways, it's easier not to try to draw a line between that, because I just did my thing for 2 years. I just did exactly what I wanted to do, and they hung out and filmed parts of it. And I had no editorial control over the film at all. I didn't even see it till the final draft. And then, I saw it at the end and was like, oh geez, like that's, But at the same time, it's a totally honest film. I mean, I think they did an incredible job of showing just the full picture.
Are you surprised by what a mega hit it's become?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know. I'm partial to climbing films. I was like, I think it's pretty good, but no, it is. It is surprising how well it's resonated with audiences. Things, yeah.
But you've gone from being just simply like really admired in the climbing community and the world that knows it to being like famous. And talk a little bit about sort of what it means to sort of just be well known, to be recognized. I'm guessing you're recognized all the time in airports, restaurants. How does it change you? What does it improve and what does it take away?
Yeah, I mean, we're in Aspen. I feel like at least 15 people in this audience could come up and give the same answer, Be like, well, I wear my hoodie.
They're curious to know yours.
Oh, yeah, well, I do the same things as everybody else. I pull my hoodie down, I keep my, no, it's just one of those things. I mean, the way I look at it, and yeah, it has actually been crazy with the film. Being in public spaces is definitely a little different. Being in airports, like being in the subway in New York, is gives me a lot of anxiety now, because you get. I mean, as it is, it's really kind of claustrophobic. But then you wind up with like 7 people staring at you, and you feel like a hunted animal, and you're like, oh no. And then, you like pull your hood a little deeper, and you're like, maybe I should exit. Maybe I'll connect to the L train right now. You're like, it's all sort of, yeah, it's not ideal, but at the same time. I made a bunch of choices that led to this. I agreed to make a freaking film about myself. Obviously, I'm not going to complain that it wound up being too successful. I'm like, well, basically, if you're gonna make a film, you want it to be the best possible film. And I'm like, well, they did a good job.
So on net, does it limit or expand your freedom?
A little bit of both. In some ways it limits my freedom for sure. So I was just in Yosemite this last month for a few days on and off, sort of in between. I've still been doing a lot of travel and events around the film and just a lot of work-related things, obligations to sponsors and things. And so I had basically 3 climbing days in Yosemite with 1 day of hiking. And so it spread throughout a couple weeks, which in some ways was a little sad for me because I'm used to just spending 2.5 months just living in Yosemite with nothing else going on. And so the timer just came on, and that does seem extremely distracting. I feel like they're trying to hook us off the stage. It's like the biggest numbers I've ever seen. Don't worry. We're going to ignore the numbers. We're going all night. So the thing about being in the valley this season was that all the places that I used to hang out, all the trails that I don't know. It was a little too crazy. Like I couldn't just hang out in public spaces.
Are you still free soloing?
Yeah, from time to time. I don't know. Nothing. I haven't done any serious free soloing since the film, I don't think. But it's kind of where you draw that line. Today I went bouldering on Independence Pass for those that live here and know the climbing. I did a couple highball boulder problems and one of them was pretty freaking high, and getting to the top of the actual boulder is probably 25 feet off the ground. It's all sort of mossy or like licheny, I guess, but slightly crumbly rock with lichen. And I was like, oh, I haven't done this in a while. It's kind of scary. And I was like, I don't really want to fall 25 feet.
But actually, that brings me to my next question. For me, I don't know if this is true for most people, but for me, the single most moving moment in the film is your first free solo attempt, I guess like October, November 2016. and you start before dawn. You're somewhere on one of the free blast slabs, and you just stop, and you decide you're not continuing. You write, the fear I felt on the thin moves on free blast was telling me something. I needed to heed the warning. So, what was that warning?
Well, I mean, the warning's like, you're going to die. I mean, but, basically overwhelming fear, just like, oh no. But, I mean, so there's a specific move on the free blast labs where you have to trust your full body weight to a right foot. And I'd sprained that ankle pretty severely earlier in the season, and my foot was still kind of swollen, and my climbing shoes were really tight. And, it was early November, so it was kind of cold out. And it was dark, just because of the way the timing is for that time of year. And so, I was like, oh, it's dark, it's cold, I can't feel my toe, and I'm about to trust my life to standing onto the right toe, or the big toe of my right foot, and I can't feel it. And it was just this obvious, like, this is, like, I should not be here. Like, this is not for me.
But one aspect which, after that, you go back down, and with obviously probably mixed emotions, but then you really prepared the route, and you learned things about the route that you didn't know before, like variations.
Yeah.
So, and you also had like an insight, which was that you were there to free solo El Cap, not free solo free rider. So tell us about how like that changes the experience.
Yeah, so what Brett's referencing is sort of, I had always felt like I was trying to free solo the route that I had climbed with a rope because, in some ways I felt slightly constrained in my vision of it because I'd climbed El Cap. There are many different routes on El Cap, and there's something like 100 different routes. And of those, maybe 15 or 20 of them can be free climbed, which means climbing with just your hands and your feet, like not using any artificial gear to pull your way upward. Free climbing is an important distinction from free soloing, which means not using a rope and still using your bare hands and feet type deal, but no rope either. So of the 20 routes up El Cap or 15 routes up El Cap that can be free climbed, the easiest one is the free rider, which is the one that the film is focused around. And so I sort of felt like I had to free solo that route. And then over the years, I sort of realized I don't really care which route I free solo. I just want to free solo El Cap, And so all of a sudden I started broadening my search quite a bit and swinging out far to the side of where you would normally climb with the rope. And where you climb the wall with the rope is sort of dictated by where the people did the first ascent and where they originally drilled the protection bolts. So they're basically metal bolts in the wall that you normally clip your rope into to protect you if you fall. And so when the people, basically Royal Robbins, Yvon Chouinard did the first ascent of that section of the wall in 1961 or 3 or something, like basically early 1960s, they chose a certain path and everyone else has kind of taken that path since then. And it suddenly occurred to me that I didn't really have to take that path. I was like, I'm not going to be clipping a rope into anything anyway. I'm going to go wherever the heck I can find good holds. And so I started searching with a much broader eye, swinging all over the wall, looking for other variations. And so I wound up finding a couple ways to go around sections of the normal route that I felt safer doing. They just felt like more secure. And so ultimately the route that I wound up climbing, isn't exactly the free rider, but it's pretty freaking close. But a few variations.
Before your climb, you had a debate with your friend Tommy Caldwell, and who is opposed to free soloing, and described it as, in his own case, irresponsible and disrespectful to his family. And you said, I understood his point of view, but disagreed. So why?
Well, yeah. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the thing about Tommy, so Tommy and I, it's not like one conversation we've had about this. I mean, we've talked about this all the time, and Tommy and I have spent probably hundreds of hours hiking together, hiking down from the top of El Cap, hiking to other mountains. We spent 4 days sharing a sleeping bag together while climbing a thing in Patagonia. So, I mean, we've had a lot of cozy time to chat together. And so, and the thing is, I mean, he loves to kind of play me off as like, oh, this bad influence, and, I'm the one free soloing, and Tommy's all safe. But Tommy and I basically do the same climbing. I mean, he doesn't explicitly free solo, but we do the same things in the mountains. We do the same things speed climbing. We basically climb in totally the same style, except that he doesn't explicitly free solo. But so we take roughly the same risks in every other aspect of climbing. We climb in very much the same way. Like when we're engaging in alpinism together, when we're climbing big snowy mountains together, we make the same decisions and we have the same threshold of safety. And so, and while we've been climbing mountains together, I mean, he has done quite a bit of free soloing with a rope on, meaning, he technically is tied to a rope, but he's just, but I'm not belaying him, let's say, because I'm dealing with something else. I'm like pulling the rappel line down, I'm coiling things up, I'm packing up our tent, like whatever. I'm dealing with other things, and he's just going up the next section of the wall with the rope. And so, technically he's not free soloing, but I mean, he's not, no one's going to catch him if he falls. It's all a bit of a gray area. You're sort of like, well, I don't know. Basically, I just think that we all sort of make intentional decisions about how we manage risk in our climbing. And I think I'm not going to call it, Tommy's my personal hero since I was a little kid. I mean, he's the man, and he's from Colorado. He's awesome. But, it's slightly disingenuous to say that, like, oh, he's not taking risk in his climbing, but I am. Because I'm like, in many aspects of our climbing, we're taking all the same risks. I'm just choosing to pursue this one style of climbing that he's not into. And, and I think that within free soloing specifically, I try to minimize my risk as much as possible, the same way that when we're climbing mountains together, we try to minimize our risk as much as possible. I mean, basically, I think that we kind of have a very similar risk profile, but mine is just extended into another aspect of climbing that he's not interested in. So that's a very long, convoluted way to say that, I think we're all just trying to make the best decisions that we can.
So but I have to ask this question because it's a stupid curiosity. You listen to music on when you're climbing, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
And is it John Denver?
It's definitely not John Denver. I don't even know. No, I don't know what that is. I mean, I've heard of John Denver. I think it's before my time.
Who do you listen to?
Like modern rock, like punk type.
Like just to pump you up?
Yeah, that's all I listen to in general, really.
Is it sort of like to just blare out the noise of your own
No,
head?
no, and that's actually the key thing is I only listen to music when I'm climbing really easy terrain. When I don't need to be fully focused, I actually prefer silence if what I'm doing matters.
You get to the top of El Cap, June 5th, 2017. You actually look happy.
June 3rd.
June 3rd,
Yeah,
excuse
yeah.
me.
No. We're correcting the record for the recording.
Thanks for the correction. I remember you're on the phone with Asana, you're saying, I'm so delighted. How long does that sense of satisfaction actually last?
I mean, pretty long, actually. I mean, I was smiling a lot for the whole week afterward, and then even now, if I watch the end of the film, if I get to talking about it, I mean, it's pretty satisfying. Like, I am very proud of the effort I put into it and of the climb itself.
Part of it, I mean, one thing that is tough about a climb like that is it's such a life ambition. It's unprecedented. It's not likely, well, I don't know, maybe it is likely to be repeated sometime soon. But what then becomes your next free solo of El Cap? What is an ambition, if there's any, that kind of equals it for you?
I mean, I honestly don't know. And
Have you been thinking about it?
Yeah, no, I mean, I've been thinking about it a bit, and honestly, that's been one of the biggest challenges of being on the film tour for the last 6 months and promoting the film and everything, is that every single movie screening, someone's like, what's next? Like, when's Free Solo 2? What are you working on? And you're like, man, I don't know. I mean, El Cap is something...
All the sequels are always worse except for The Godfather 2. That's the only good sequel.
Yeah, I don't think there's definitely no Free Solo 2, that's for sure. Yeah. No, I honestly don't know. I mean... So,
but are you like talking to people? Like, what would be something that's really like?
Well, I don't think talking to people would be the way anyway. I mean, it has to be something from the heart to some extent, something that inspires me from within. I mean, I've been working on physically improving as a climber. Training, just trying to climb harder. Improve as a climber.
Do you think you could break 2 on El Cap?
Yeah, we did last summer.
You did?
Sub 2 hours on El Cap.
Oh my
Actually,
God.
there'll be a whole 45-minute film about that.
Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So, but it's not Free Solo 2. It's I don't know what it's going to be called, but so for those here who are real climbers, the Real Rock Tour this year, which is a climbing film tour that travels all over the world, will have this 45-minute film about me and Tommy climbing El Cap in sub 2 hours, which was our big goal last year. But that's actually been the really interesting thing. Is everyone asks what's next post El Cap, but so. This will be a long ramble here, so settle in. But so, part of my process for free soloing El Cap was to not build it up too big in my mind. I mean, obviously it was this dream that I had forever. It was really important to me, but I didn't want to. But I had been physically able to climb El Cap without falling since 2008 or 9 or something. So basically, it'd been almost 10 years that I was physically able to. That's kind of the bare minimum to consider free soloing El Cap, is that you obviously have to be able to climb from the bottom to the top without falling off or using your rope at all. And so technically I'd been there physically for quite a long time. And so really it was the mental side that took so many years to develop, and it took a long time for me to feel confident doing it. And anyway, so because of that, I didn't want to build it up too big in my mind, because I didn't want to put too much more pressure on the mental side of it. I didn't want to put it on this pedestal as like, this will be the craziest thing ever done. This is so extreme. This is the hardest thing that any human can imagine. I didn't want to like put it way up here when the reality is that physically, I was capable. I just had to actually do it. And so part of the way that I kept it from putting it too high in my mind was to kind of treat it as one of many other climbs during the year. So I had all my normal, as a professional climber, you basically go on expeditions, you work on other climbing goals. So right after I did the free solo, actually, I went on an expedition to Alaska with some of my teammates on the North Face team, and to climb big mountains near Denali. Well, not that, 5,000 foot rock walls. And so, not really mountains, but big walls. And that was specifically training for a North Face expedition in that winter, going to Antarctica to climb first ascents of big walls, which was an incredible experience for me, something totally new for me, really character building, because I don't really ski that well, and to like live on skis in Antarctica climbing big granite walls, it was incredible. And then later in the year, Tommy and I did the speed record on the nose. And so the point is I had all these other big climbing goals lined out in front of me. And so I free soloed El Cap. I immediately went to Alaska. I practiced my skiing a bit, climbed some mountains. That got me ready for Antarctica. I trained a bit more during the springtime. Then Tommy and I did the speed record.
Is your physical stamina, like, it's not slowed down at all? Or are you still improving? Or are you feeling like your old age?
No, well, obviously I've already begun my decline. I'm 33. I'm halfway done. No, actually looking around the room, I'm like, oh no, you guys. No. I don't know. It's hard to say. Actually, I'll get to that in 1 second though. So my point with the whole thing is that I did all that climbing, and then the film came out, and then so since then it's been 7 months of touring with the film, going to the Academy Awards, doing the whole crazy thing. And so now every day people are like, what's next? And in some ways I'm like, well, I already did what's next. I did the climb, and then I kept doing interesting things for a year. I kept challenging myself as a climber. I did several things that I'm quite proud of. Climbing El Cap in sub 2 hours had been a bit of a dream as well. And we were pretty proud of it when we did it. We're like, that's awesome. But of course it's overshadowed by this incredible film that goes on to win an Academy Award. And so, it's a little bit weird for me to be like, what's the next big thing? I'm like, I don't know. I'll just keep chipping away at it. I'll keep setting goals for myself. I'll keep trying to improve. I'll keep doing things. Who knows if they'll ever be... basically they'll never be as good a film about it. So it's like, for the mainstream public, no one's ever going to be like, that's incredible in the same way. But for me personally as a climber, it's fine.
Do you ever imagine a future without climbing?
No, I don't think so.
Does Sani?
No, she loves climbing too. We climb together all the time. There will almost certainly be a future where I'm not pushing as hard at climbing, where it's not my every thought, when I'm not training all the time, when I'm not worried about my diet, when I'm just casually climbing for my own fun. But we'll see when we get there.
One of the things I want to ask you about before we turn to audience questions, because this is important, is I'd like you to talk a bit about the Honnold Foundation, what it is, what you're doing, what your ambitions are for it.
So the Honnold Foundation is, I've started it 7 years ago, I guess. That makes me feel old, speaking of aging. So I started many years ago, and we've been giving grants to other nonprofits, basically supporting solar projects around the world, supporting energy access. And I guess the long answer of it is that, I don't know, how deep should we go in this audience?
Go for it.
Yeah. Well, okay, so when you ask about what's next, honestly, the foundation projects that we're working on right now are a big part of what's inspiring me and sort of motivating me right now, because I've been doing so much traveling with the film that, I just don't have any big climbing dreams right now. But some of the work that we're supporting the first cooperative solar microgrid in Puerto Rico, which is potentially the island's first. Oh, nice. And so a month or two ago, I went to Puerto Rico, visited the community group that we're working with, saw the project, saw the businesses that will be affected by it, and it was incredible. It was personally very satisfying. I was like, oh, this is great. And so, when people ask what's next, I'm kind of like, well, I don't know. People want to hear free solo 2 or like some rad climbing objective. But the reality is that I'm pretty content training in the gym, improving as a climber, working with the foundation, basically living life and sort of seeing how it plays out, just trying to do something useful in the world while still trying to improve, at what I do. I don't know. It's just not a sexy answer.
And if someone wants to get linked up to the Honnold Foundation, what do they do?
So HonnoldFoundation.org, you can see all the projects that we've supported over the years. You can see the type of projects that we're supporting currently around the world. We're mostly focused on the Americas for the next couple of years, just because it's slightly easier to oversee. But yeah, I mean, reach out to HonnellFoundation.org. Goes to the executive director, who's this incredible woman, basically we're just working away. I think later in the summer, I'm going to be going to Detroit to do a project there. It's more domestic, but I'm still very much an area with some need. And yeah, I mean, it's nice.
We're going to now start doing questions. I guess I'll call people, but I'll cut you off if you start bloviating. So ask a question, like 1-2 sentences, question mark, and then you're good. So there's a young woman right here. There you are. Maybe just tell us your name and stand up and ask a question.
Hi, I'm Maddie Momedy from the Bezos Scholar Foundation, and I was wondering what inspired you to start climbing?
There wasn't a specific thing that inspired me. I just always loved climbing. As a little kid, I climbed on things. I loved climbing trees and buildings and whatever else. And then a climbing gym opened in Sacramento, which is where I'm from. And so my parents read about it in the newspaper, and they just took me to the climbing gym because they thought it'd be a more structured outlet for, it's better than me jumping off the roof and playing around at home. They were sort of like, oh, at least this way you can do it properly with padded floors and ropes and all that kind of thing. And so then, obviously, I loved climbing in the gym, and then did that for the rest of my life, basically. But still going to the gym all the time.
Up here, this gentleman.
Hey, would you consider releasing all 4 hours of footage, pretty please?
I mean, I have no say in it. I don't have any. Like I said, I had no editorial control over the film. I mean, I would actually be sort of interested in seeing that too, but I think it'd be pretty boring. It's hard to say, because I mean, the reality is that free soloing is pretty. It's a nice even pace. It's pretty mellow. I mean, there's a lot of easy climbing on El Cap. It just, it'd be 4 hours of just trotting up the wall. Yeah.
I think the answer is people would love if someone.
Well, there's also they'd have to censor out a bunch of full frontal nudity because obviously I peed off the wall like 6 times or something, and a few things like that. But that's fine. It'd be rated R. Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Someone from this side. Yes.
I wanted to know what motivated you to keep achieving these extraordinary goals.
I don't know. I mean, I think for me, part of it is the fact that I've always felt like I can do a little bit better. I think that the real motivation is improving, and in some ways, all these, what you call incredible achievements or goals or whatever you said. I mean, they're just ways of sort of measuring improvement for me. I like to take on slightly bigger challenges. I like having slightly more complex challenges, and so you just keep. I've always been all about incremental progress. I mean, it's funny because the solos that we talked about were sort of big milestones for me in my climbing, but I've done, I think maybe 35 free solos that are the first free solos or things that I'm sort of proud of. And really, when you lay them all out, 35 of them, it's a lot. It's a long, long road that eventually culminated with El Cap for me. It's like many, many small steps in different directions until I finally was able to actually climb El Cap.
Right here in the middle. Yeah.
Hey, I was just curious what impact your growing fame has had on your mental stability and clarity when you climb today compared to, say, 5-10 years ago.
I think overall it hasn't had that big of an impact. I mean, so I think obviously when I'm climbing in climbing gyms and everyone's staring at me, it's slightly distracting and a little bit harder to perform in the way that I'd like. It's hard to totally shut that aside. But I don't know. I mean, I went out climbing on the past day, and I felt just like, it felt just like any other day of climbing. It was incredible. So I mean, yeah, I don't think it's had that big of an impact. I mean, to some extent, I think that's what I love about climbing is the fact that it forces you to focus 100% on what you're doing, and really that's the joy of climbing is that you're so in the actual activity of it that you're not self-conscious about those kinds of things.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, eagerness counts. So definitely over there.
Yeah. Oh no, they're all heckling. I know them, and I don't like them.
Well, we have a question because
Just at dinner.
yeah, Emily and I have both watched you solo in person in real life, and it was absolutely horrifying.
Yeah, that's fair. But you also were witness to one of the more horrifying free solos.
I was.
Actually, well, that's not totally true. So for those who don't know, they're both also professional climbers that we're all on the North Face team. So they're heckling and they should be removed.
No. But I do have a legitimate question on the regards to free soloists. How did you feel knowing that your friends were watching you? Like it talks about it in the film a little bit, but actually, really, how did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound too callous, but I didn't totally care. I mean, I knew that, I know it's super stressful to watch, and I don't like watching other people free solo if they're pushing hard. I mean, it's really stressful to watch.
Did you get stressed out watching the movie? Like
No. I mean, that doesn't stress me out because I'm like, oh, that's me at my best. I'm like, that's awesome. No, but watching a lot of my friends, I have a lot of other friends that have soloed things, and it can be stressful. But no, I mean, I think that the main thing was that I cared about my own safety more than they cared about my safety. Basically, I mean, I kind of already knew that I was being as careful as I could be, that I was preparing as much as possible, and so I knew that it was super hard for them to watch. But at the same time, I also knew that I was only going to do the climb if I felt totally comfortable, and if I felt comfortable, it should be okay for they should be able to hold it together. Basically, I don't know. I mean, I know it's slightly, I don't know. There's no great way to say that, but they're professionals, they just have to put on their, I don't know,
up here
put
in
on a
front.
brave face. Yeah.
Thank you. First of all, thank you. This has been an amazing conversation. Really, really great to have you here. Alex, in the film, your personal life is really sort of on display, not just the unflattering stuff that you thought was unflattering in the beginning of your relationship, but there's filmmaker prerogative in what's shown and what's not shown, and there's a sort of story arc to your personal development that goes along with your development as a climber and your breakthroughs in climbing and your personal breakthroughs. How real was that, and how much of that was licensed by the director? And I mean, did you feel like you had a sort of true personal breakthrough in your capacity to have a relationship and be, committed to somebody?
She's a psychologist.
No. I'm about ready to lay down on the sofa and just open up. I'm ready. No, I don't know. I mean, definitely don't think that they took any creative license with it. I mean, I think that it's all honest. It's all in there. I mean, there are a couple things that, so for example, with my relationship with my girlfriend, at the end of the film, I say I love you on the summit of the mountain as I'm hiking down. And many audiences interpret that as the first time I say I love you to her because it's the first time it's shown. That's not the case. I mean, we've been dating for 2 years already. I try to use the L word sparingly, but it does come out from time to time. And so, I wouldn't call that artistic license, though. I mean, I think that, because that is an honest moment that, everything in the film happened. It's all honest, it's all there. But they had 700 hours of footage that they had to condense down to a 90-minute film. Obviously, they did it in the best way that they could. So, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think there's some legitimate. Well, I mean, honestly, I would hope that anybody has some kind of actual personal growth over 2 years of, over 2 years of life. And Sani's an incredible woman, and she definitely has pushed me on a lot of those things as well. She's kind of required me to be slightly better in some ways, and so I've done my best to meet her expectations. But
let's go to the far side. This young man in green.
Oh, awesome.
What's your worst free soloing moment?
Oh,
Good question.
well. We are going all night. No, there are plenty. I don't know. So it depends what you mean by worst. So the closest that I've come to falling off things has definitely been, I've had maybe a half dozen experiences where I've broken holds or things, things have suddenly happened where like a hold snaps off the wall. But the thing about those is that in some ways they aren't my worst moments because they're over before you even realize what happened. Basically, if something breaks off and you don't fall off the wall, then, by the time you realize that you broke a hold, you already didn't fall off. And so basically all there is to do is take a breath and just, compose yourself and sort of carry on. It's kind of like, if you narrowly avoid a car accident or something, by the time you know what happened, the accident's already avoided. So there's nothing really to be afraid of at that point, even though you still feel a big rush of adrenaline and your body starts to shake and it can be all traumatizing. But, the reality of it is that the dangerous situation has already passed at that point. So I think that most of my most dangerous situations in free soloing weren't really that scary because they just happened instantly, and thankfully, they didn't wind up being catastrophic. Most of the scariest experiences were sort of things like Half Dome that are sort of long, mounting dread where you're like, am I off route? Like, will I ever make it to the top? Who knows if this is the right? Actually, particularly when I was younger and I was sort of learning how to free solo, I had a bunch of experiences where I was really bad at reading topos, which is the maps that people draw for where routes go. I used to be really bad at interpreting like what's a left-facing corner, what's a right-facing corner, where's the crack, where's the little roof, So now you can like look at the map, look at the wall, and be like, okay, I'm going to go up there and then left and then up, and it's going to be perfect. But when I was younger, I would just sort of like, oh, I think this must be the one, and then I'd climb halfway up it and be like, I don't remember the map saying there were supposed to be bolts on this route, and then be like, why am I passing bolts? And then suddenly realize that I was like 500 feet away from the route that I thought I was supposed to be on, and I was actually just on the wrong wall. And you're like, oh no, and then start to panic, and then so really I think that experiences of mounting dread have always been the hardest. That's the long answer, but.
Another one over here. You, sir.
I know that your max climbing grade is obviously higher than the grade that you're willing to necessarily solo at. What grade would you solo at this point? What's kind of the max grade that you would consider?
It's not really a grade thing. It's basically how secure does it feel. And that's kind of the challenge of El Cap. I mean, El Cap isn't actually really that hard of a grade by comparison. The technical difficulty grade of El Cap is a grade at which I often warm up on at a sport crag, like when I'm just out for a normal day of climbing at a cliff with a rope. That's what I would kind of consider generally my second warm-up of the day. Once I kind of get limbered up a little bit, I'm like, okay, I'm still warming up. So, I mean, you can't really compare the grade. I mean, it really just comes down to how secure you feel while you're doing that style of climbing. But no.
Let's go in the middle with this guy waving his arm.
He's frantically waving. He must be psyched.
I'm not a climber, so this is maybe a naive question, but it seems like my assumption is it's easier to climb up than it is to climb down. So is there a point of no return where you have to keep going up?
So that's not totally true. I mean, so down climbing, so it is fair to say that in general, climbing up is easier than climbing down. And part of that's just because when you're climbing up, you can see where your hands are going. But when you're climbing down, it's really hard to see where your feet are going just because they're blocked by your own body. So it's basically hard to see. But there are some styles of climbing that are a lot easier to go back down, like say chimneys or certain types of crack. You can kind of slide back down them. And it's actually physically a lot easier to go down. I think the biggest difference, though, is that most people find it easier to go up because that's all they ever practice. Very few climbers spend a lot of time down climbing, so they're just not used to that style of movement. But I have spent a lot of time down climbing because that's really an important part of free soloing, is to feel comfortable reversing things. And so in general, I feel pretty comfortable reversing almost everything that I've soloed. I mean, that's not totally true on something like El Cap because it's just so big and so hard and it's such an undertaking. That typically it's probably better just carry on to the top than reverse, the thousands of feet that you've climbed. But in general, down climbing is an important thing for soloing.
Next question. I see hands way in the back on the left. Wait for the microphone.
Hi, I'm Sarah. Thank you. This is actually a question from my boyfriend. He wants to know how many times on free solo did you come down to like one feature, like where maybe 3 limbs were off?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, basically, how often was my life depending on a single limb? Yes. I don't know. I mean, I have to count all the think about all the moves on the route, but they're probably a couple places basically. But I mean, specifically that move we were talking about on the free blast slab where your whole weight is on one foothold, just for a moment. There are probably a couple other things sort of like that. But there are tons of places on the route where if a single thing slipped, you would fall off. I mean, like, not to say that you're only using one limb, but if you're in counter pressure between one hand and one foot and you're pushing between them, if either of them slipped, then obviously you're no longer in counter pressure, you're just pinwheeling backward off the wall. So, so there are whole sections of the wall that are climbing in that kind of style that require all of your limbs to stay on the wall.
Let's go to the center. There's a lady waving her hand right here.
Hi, my name is Belize. I wanted to ask about your climbs where you use a gear. What are the notable improvements that you've had with gear, and are there any innovations that you would recommend or have had change with the gear that you use?
That's in all my months of touring, nobody's ever asked about innovations in gear, and I appreciate that. So yeah, I mean, over the 20 years that I've climbed, there definitely have been big improvements in gear, but they're sort of all incremental, I think, for the most part. Things get a little lighter. I mean, particularly with climbing hard goods, like the actual equipment that you're putting into the rock, it's all gotten a little bit safer, a little bit lighter. Ropes have gotten thinner, which means that they weigh less and they're easier to pull behind you. I mean, in general, it's all just gotten slightly easier, but nothing groundbreaking, you know. It's sort of in the same way that apparel continues to get better. You know, you're a little bit warmer, a little bit lighter, a little bit more waterproof, or better wicking, you know, things like that. But at the same time, I mean, you're still wearing clothes. I mean, you know, so yeah. I mean, it hasn't totally changed the game, but it is nice to have lighter mountain boots, lighter equipment. It just means that you can climb a little faster, basically.
Is nude climbing going to become a thing?
Not by me, but no, actually, I mean, and so speaking of that, so climbing's in the Olympics next year. So climbing's in the 2020 Olympics, and climbing in general has been booming as a sport. And so I am personally sort of curious as to where, you know, what happens if more money comes into climbing, if there's more innovation, because there hasn't really been any major changes in equipment in a long time. It'll be interesting if people really push it in new directions.
Yes, you.
Hi, Alex. I hate to get back to your relationship, but if your first film was called Free and then Solo, what would the next one be called?
Well, I mean, the film crew always jokes that it's still solo when Sonny leaves me and I'm back to living in the van, you know. But
I think the answer she was looking for was Married with Children.
Oh no, but isn't that a TV show? Oh yeah. No, that sucks. I don't want that. Well, we'll see. I meant the show sucks. I'm sure life will be great, but.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Wait for the mic, so we can record you. Is there someone there? Thanks.
You're really making poor mic runners just really get their exercise. You gotta.
So first question, are you still eating off the spatula? And the second question is about the MRI in your brain. So do you really think that, I mean, did I understand correctly that the test said that you experience less fear than another person would?
Okay, so first with the spatula, I mean, when I'm in the van, yeah, I often eat off a spatula still. I mean, the whole point of eating off the spatula is you don't scratch your pan, you have fewer dishes, it's very efficient, it's very practical. I strongly encourage everybody to do it. Actually. Anyway, the amygdala thing, we were chatting about it a bit backstage earlier, but basically, I mean, what exactly is your question? If I don't feel fear the same as other folks, or? So yeah, so I think that for those that haven't seen it in the film, there's this, you know, maybe 30-second scene where I take an fMRI, they scan my brain, and it basically shows no activation of my amygdala, which is sort of the fight or flight center of the brain, during this specific round of tests. But the takeaway from that wasn't so much, but the thing is, it's there and it works fine. Just don't get me wrong, it's all good. The thing was that basically through years and years of practice, I've desensitized myself to certain levels of stimulus, I think. And that's kind of the takeaway talking with a researcher, and there's a full feature-length article about that exact. I mean, the reason I was taking that fMRI was for an article for Nautilus magazine. It was a science magazine. And so if you're interested, read the article, dive in deep to it. But basically, over years of exposure to scary situations, I've sort of desensitized myself to the point that the test that you take where you're laying in a tube and you're looking at images, I was like, I didn't find it very scary because it's not, you know, because it's not dangerous at all. But had they thrown a snake into the fMRI with me, I'm sure my amygdala would have lit up like a Christmas tree and you'd be like, oh geez, you know. But so, you know, I saw it as all perfectly rational, totally normal. You know, I was like, of course my brain's not going to light up looking at black and white photos while I lay here perfectly comfortable and safe inside a tube. I was like, that's stupid. But apparently the average human mind does react to the images the same, you know, as if they were actually experiencing it. But I think it's because the average person hasn't, you know, been scared out of their mind for years and years and years, having near-death experiences over and over,
Okay. There is a young woman directly in front of me, in the middle there, raising your hand. Yeah.
Coming from both sides, this is a big moment for the mics.
So when you're climbing with other people, do you like when they give you beta on a route or no?
Yeah, so beta is what it's called when you get a method for how to climb something, and so it's really common for climbers to tell each other, like raise your left foot and sag your right hip, and open up to the wall and grab that with your left hand. Like that's what's referred to as beta. I freaking love it. Whenever I get to climb with folks who are much better than me, it's such a pleasure to have somebody just tell you, like, here's how you should do it. And you're like, oh, it's so nice. I find it. I mean, actually, so today I was climbing with two guys who were both very good climbers, and it was really nice to be able to share beta. They were also both slightly taller than me and big and strong, strapping men. And so it was kind of nice to have people who were roughly the same size, roughly the same strength, be able to just tell me, like, here's how you do it. And just, I was like, oh, it's such a pleasure. It's like having a guided tour. Yeah, I love that. Some people really hate it though. I mean, particularly if you're climbing in a commercial gym, it's like kind of poor form to just yell advice at somebody that you don't know, being like, raise your left foot, and they're like, F you. I'm like working it out for myself, but I like it.
On the left, right there. Yeah.
So I'm not a professional climber either, but I had a question. As an ultra runner, I always carry water with me. How did you do that whole climb with no water?
I didn't. I stashed a liter of water and a little bit of food in 2 different places on the route. So, and that's part of the appeal of having a camera crew and having stuff like that, is that it makes the logistics a lot easier, because for them to get into position to film the climb, they had to rappel huge sections of the wall. So they were able to stash some food and water for me. They carried my sneaker, my shoes up to the summit so that I didn't have to pre-stash them ahead of time. All the things that they did for me are things that I easily could have done myself a couple days before with a lot more planning and foresight. But because they're filming, it just makes it pretty easy. Where the morning of, you're just like, here are all my snacks. Put them up there when you go. It's like, no. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, that's one of the reasons that I've agreed to work with film crews over the years, is because that in some ways it does make your actual climb easier, or it makes your own logistical process easier.
This side of the room, sir with a white shirt. Yep.
So when you think about the limits of what you can do, is that defined by what you think, what's physically possible, or your intuition?
I mean, I think it's mostly limited by what's physically possible. I mean, there are some things that I just can't do. I mean, there are some little edges that I cannot pull with my fingers. I mean, so if you're talking about specifically with free soloing, I think that being able to physically do something is the base, and then beyond that, whether or not you mentally can do it, that's kind of the extra step. But there's this whole physical layer at the bottom that, I mean, if you can't do it, you can't do it. And to me, the physical side has always come harder. Like, I'm not, actually the guy heckling me over there, that guy, freakishly strong fingers, very, very strong, naturally gifted in a way that I never have been. And so, the physical side for me has always taken a lot of work, a lot of training, a lot of effort, and I still just can't really be that strong. I hope Maddie's psyched over there. He's single, by the way, in case anyone's interested. But, yeah, that's him. He's living out of a tent, I think, but it's pretty cool. But anyway, so for some climbers, the physical side comes easier and the mental side is really hard. For whatever reason, the mental side has always been slightly easier to me, but the physical side is still a struggle. I mean, it's just not that easy to pull yourself up on a tiny little edge.
Okay, I'm just trying to go. Now you asked a question already.
Guy in black right there.
Yeah, whoever Alex pointed to.
Yeah, the guy right next to the microphone with the black, yeah. It's all about keeping it right by the mic, and it's easy. Yeah.
Hey, Alex. It seems like anytime a new record in any sport is set that no one ever did before, somebody else comes along and duplicates it. What you did doesn't seem like it's readily duplicable. Is there someone in your community, or have you met someone who said, I'm going to do what you did? and in a way that's credible, that's believable and possible? Or is this something that's years and years away from being replicated?
Well, so, yeah, it's an interesting question, and it's really hard to know for sure because, like I was just saying, I mean, there's such a difference between the physical side of it and the mental side of it. And so physically, there are probably, there are many people on Earth right now climbing who can physically climb El Cap without falling off. I mean, there are, I don't know, maybe 20 people or something who could potentially walk up to the base, climb from the bottom to the top without falling. But none of them free solo, and none of them really have the drive for it. None of them necessarily want to. But conceivably, if any of them were just like, screw it, I don't care about living or dying, I'm just going for it. I mean, one of them potentially could. So, I mean, in some ways, I've always kind of darkly joked that the right person just has to have a bad breakup, and then they'll just go and do it. And so yeah. Well, I mean, okay, no, so to bring it back full circle, though, so Tommy Caldwell went through a really difficult divorce many years ago, and he did have a moment. He's the most successful cap climber ever. He put up most of the other free routes on the wall. The climbing shoes that I was wearing are named after him, the Tommy Caldwell Pro model. Like, he designed them for climbing on El Cap. He's an incredible climber, and so he was going through this very difficult divorce, and he had a moment where he was sitting on top of this route, looking over at El Cap, being like, I should just go over there and solo that. Because I mean, I don't know, sometimes you have dark days. And he is somebody who physically could. I mean, if he was in the right mood, potentially he could. And so it's kind of a weird thing, though, because, I don't think that anyone's actively trying to. I don't think that anyone really wants to. I don't think that anyone's really in the right place that they should. But you never really know. I mean, somebody could. But, I mean, time will tell. Though, if history is any guide, most of the other big cutting-edge free solos haven't really been repeated for 20 years or so. And so, it seems to be sort of a generational thing, but, time will tell.
We are over time, but I'm told we can go over time. So, are you good with that?
Yeah, I mean, whatever you guys want. Yeah. We're just partying.
Okay, so yes, over there.
Maybe just a few more questions, and then I'm happy to hang out and chat with whoever wants to afterward. And so, don't feel like we're holding you hostage, but if folks are interested, we're happy to chat as long as you guys want.
Okay, great, thank you.
What would be an activity that you would be too freaked out to do? Like skydiving or?
Oh, like knitting, like ballroom dancing. Like, oh goodness. No, I don't know about freaked out. I mean, in general, I don't know, public performance, like if I had to sing opera, I'm like, that's not for me. I don't know.
Thanks so much for this, by the way. This is a real treat. And I was just curious as to, I mean, I'm sure this theme has been beaten to death here, but I'm wondering what your risk assessment kind of strategy is, how it's changed over the last couple decades, and maybe kind of who your mentors are in that, or if there are any, or if you're, studying risk assessment. I know it's a big deal in other sports, pilots, kayaking, what have you.
So I've never explicitly studied risk assessment. I don't technically know anything about it, from a education standpoint. Though I have had, countless conversations with people like Tommy Caldwell, other climbers, peers, and even conversations like this. I mean, basically climbers talk about risk and managing risk all the time because it's such an important part of the sport. I mean, it's sort of at the core of climbing is how do you manage the risk associated with it. I don't know, what was the first half of the question? How's my process changed over time? Yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe my biggest development has been sort of accepting. I don't know. I think as I've gotten older, I've sort of accepted that even though something might feel like 100%, realistically, it's never 100%. There's just always. I mean, I've just seen too many friends have terrible accidents, too many unfortunate things happen in the mountains, and so I've kind of realized that even if something feels 100, it never actually is 100, and in a lot of ways, I've actually really limited my easy soloing now because I feel like that's kind of where I'm rolling the dice the most. When I was younger, I had a lot of kind of high mileage days where I was going out and climbing things that were physically easy, but tons and tons of them, like say 50 routes in a day or something. And I think that was a really important way for me to sort of build my base and to feel comfortable soloing and to grow as a climber. But I pretty much don't do that at all anymore, because I recognize that even if it's an easy route and I feel totally fine on it, there is a slight chance that something's just randomly going to break or something random is going to happen. Just because I basically know many people who have had accidents like that, and you're like, well. So, I mean, I guess that, yeah, I'm a little more conservative over time, which is ironic because you watch the film Free Solo and you're like, oh, that guy's crazy. But in a lot of ways, that actually represents me reining it in quite a bit, because I trained for 2 years to do one climb that I really cared about, as opposed to just going for it. I mean, had I just not really cared about it, I could have just tried on day one. It probably would have worked out. Probably, 85% chance would have worked out fine, and there wouldn't be a movie. But instead, I wanted to get to 100, so I spent 2 years working on it. And it's funny because people watch free solo and they're like, oh, so much free soloing. But I mean, that's 2 years of climbing, and I did, maybe 4 or 5 free solos in the film, culminating with El Cap, which was obviously really important to me. But I did, maybe 6 or 7 days of free soloing mixed, interspersed throughout 2 years of training. So, I mean, the ratio is pretty good.
Let's take one more question, and that will be to
the really enthusiastic
the
lady
really
in the back.
enthusiastic person all the way in the back.
Yeah, she seems psyched. All right, is that even a she? I can't tell. I won't go with sexes. It's really hard to see. I apologize.
Did you memorize every single move, not just the biggest ones? And do you still memorize them?
No, so I didn't memorize every move on the whole climb. Mostly because I didn't have to. Like I was saying earlier, the El Cap maybe breaks down into a third relatively easy climbing, a third sort of moderate climbing, and a third really hard climbing. So the hard climbing, I knew every move, I knew everything about it. But for the easy climbing, I just knew that I could do it, and just, obviously I'd climbed it many times before, but I didn't have to memorize the moves. I could just trust that I could go up there and have a nice time and just climb. So I saved my effort for the parts that mattered the most.
Let me just sort of take advantage and just ask you a final question. So there have been a lot of really young people asking you, and you write about how you were a young kid with not quite posters of Tommy on your wall, but pretty close. So now you're that role model for, I think, a lot of really young climbers. And what role do you want to model?
I don't know, that's a hard question, because I've definitely never aspired to be a role model of any kind. I would tell kids to stay in school, even though I unfortunately did not, but learn from my mistakes. No, I don't know. I mean, I think that I think the film does a good job of sort of showing that if you put enough work into something, I don't know. I mean, I guess if I want to be any kind of role model, I want it to be around living intentionally, choosing the things that you care about, working hard toward them, and putting in the effort required, working on the things you care about and doing them. I mean, it was never, that was never my design, and, I certainly would never call myself a role model, but I'm sort of like, if you're going to pull anything from it, I mean, I hope it's something like that. We all have a finite life. I mean, we're all going to die. We have a limited amount of time. Use it for the things that you care the most about.
Alex Honnold.